I'm Sarah, I'm an alcoholic. And for the record, I said no because this makes me so nervous. I've done this 100 times and I just don't like it. It takes me a minute to get my sea legs and to get all the jitters out. And it's crazy because I used to love doing it when I was drinking. If you'd have gave me a microphone and a bottle of vodka, and I would have been here all night. But thank you, Darren, and for asking me and giving me this opportunity to come and participate in my recovery. And thank you to Eric and to Susan and Valerie. And thank you to everybody that put on this convention, because I know how hard something like this is to do, and we are so lucky that you showed up and gave of your time and love and service. And then we get to have a good night. Look at us. There's so many of you. There's so many miracles out there. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm super geeked out for this program. It's the best thing I found out there. It saved my life, and it gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams. And I would go anywhere, and I would do anything, even if it makes my tummy hurt, to come and get to carry the message like it was carried to me. So my name is Sarah. You heard that. My sobriety date's April 14th, 2009. My sponsor is a lady named Tina M., and my home group is the Monday Night Women's Staying Sober meeting in Rancho Santa Margarita. And what it was like for me is I was a little girl with big feelings. I was like this little tiny premature. I was like 4 pounds by the time they got me home from the hospital. I started kindergarten when I was 4, so I was always underaged and undersized with feelings that didn't fit in my body. I have no idea why, but I was the kid that all the adults would say was overdramatic and overly emotional and overly sensitive and overreacting, and they were right, but I was also 6, so I didn't know what you wanted me to do with that information. And the thing that I felt the most was that I wasn't enough, or that I didn't have enough. And I think when you feel like you're not enough, you're always looking for something more. And the thing I was looking for was attention. It was the first thing that I was ever addicted to, was attention and validation. And I got a lot of it at home. I was a very annoying child. You could not pay attention to me. But I heard someone say in a meeting one time that they were a black hole of emotional need, and I've never related to anything more in my entire life. So my parents didn't stand a chance. And I was a kid that went to the nurse's office every single day, and then I got kicked out of the nurse's office. I wasn't allowed to go back there anymore, so I started going to the school psychologist's office. And what I thought my whole life was that they weren't allowed to kick me out of there, right? They can't kick you out of the school psychologist's office. And then my girlfriend said to me a couple months ago, she goes, Sarah, did you ever think that maybe they can kick you out of there, but they thought you were mentally ill? I had never thought of that before, but I do now. Like, I think that now. And I would lie to the school psychologist, and I would tell her that I was running away from home in the middle of the night, and I was not. I would tell her that family members of mine had died that had not, and my poor mom would get these condolence calls from the school, super awkward. And I was just so unhappy, and I didn't know why, but I had a lot of ideas. My whole life, the thing that I've always done is, if I just had this, then I would be okay, right? Like if my parents just didn't get divorced when I was little, then I would feel okay. Or if we just never moved when I was in 2nd grade, then I would feel okay. And as an adult, what that can look like is if I just had this job or this man or this much money in my bank account. And the book talks about that, right? It talks about this delusion that we suffer from, that we can wrest satisfaction from this life if only we could manage well. And I was obsessed with that. I was obsessed with ordering the outside of my life to look a certain way so that I could feel okay inside. And when I was 16, what that looked like was I decided that if I could just get my braces off, then I could be happy, because they were ruining my life, and I wanted to get a boyfriend, and I wanted to have more friends, and I wanted to be popular, and I certainly couldn't do that with braces. And I went and I told my mom, I was like, hey, good news, I figured it out. The secret to my own happiness. And she told me I couldn't get my braces off because she said that I had only had them on for 2 weeks, which was true. And she also said that they'd paid a lot of money for those braces, which was also true. And I was so mad that my mom told me no that I ran upstairs and I went to their medicine cabinet and I grabbed a bottle of pills and I took the whole thing and I tried to kill myself at my mom. Yeah. And what I had actually grabbed was a bottle of barbiturates, which I still don't know why my parents had that in the medicine cabinet, but I took the whole thing, and I did almost kill myself. And then I got my braces off a couple weeks later, and that taught me a very valuable lesson about emotional manipulation. And that was not the last time I threatened to kill myself at someone. It wasn't even the second to last time that I threatened to kill myself or tried to kill myself at someone. But that was before I had ever taken a drink. So by the time I finally took that drink, we all needed it. Everyone in that household needed it. And alcohol was my first promise. It was the first time I ever felt any kind of hope. It was the first time I felt like, if this exists for me, then I'm going to be okay. Like, I can participate in my life if one day I can grow up and be a heavy drinker. And that was my dream, you guys. Like, that was all I wanted. I wanted fancy glasses, and I wanted to drink, and I wanted to be able to check out whenever I wanted to. And alcohol was always kind of, I think a lot of people have a lot of fun with alcohol. I had a lot of fun with alcohol too until I didn't. But alcohol has always been the carrot dangling in front of me to get me to participate in my life. And I didn't even get to drink a lot when I was a teenager because I had a lot of church friends, and I was really compliant, and I was a rule follower. I was a sociopath, but I was also a rule follower. It's a weird combination. But I was a good girl, but just the thought that one day I could be a heavy drinker, and I was in it to win it. And I started to participate in school, and I got more friends, and I finally got that boyfriend I'd been dreaming of, and he didn't know what he was signing up for with me. And things were going really good. And then my senior year of high school, my dad lost his job, and my parents moved to Florida, and I stayed in California. And for a really long time, I thought that I had been abandoned. Like, I told myself that story. I told you that story. Hey, my parents left when I was 17, and they abandoned me. And I lived in my car, and I was homeless for like a week, And but I loved that story because I was the victim of it. And I don't often tell stories I'm not the victim of. And I got a lot of self-pity out of that. I got a lot of sympathy out of that. It made me feel scrappy and tough. And then I got sober some years later, and I did my first 4-step, and my sponsor was going through, and she's like, tell me about being abandoned. And what had actually happened was that my dad lost his job. He couldn't find another one. My parents were about to lose their house. They thought they were going to have to file for bankruptcy. And the job that he found was in Florida, and they didn't want to go. They didn't want to move across the country. Nothing against Florida. This story always comes off as very anti-Florida. I don't like them. Nothing against it. I just didn't want to live there. And they had no choice. My parents had to leave everything that they knew, their family, their home, their community. My brother was starting middle school. They were going to have to drag him across the country. And they came up to me and they said, we're so sorry. We're so sorry that we have to do this to you, but we're going to make it up to you. We're going to put you through college. We're going to buy you a new car. They have screened-in pools in Florida. We're going to have one of those. And I said, no, thank you. No, thanks. And they said, well, you don't have a choice. You're 17 years old, and we're certainly not going to abandon you. You've got to come with us. And I said, if you try to make me come with you to Florida, I'm going to kill myself. And so now my parents, who already have this shit sandwich in front of them, sorry, I don't mean to swear, but they already, it's a bad situation for them. And now they got to make this choice of whether they drag their daughter with them to Florida where she's going to kill themselves, or whether they leave their mentally ill child across the country. And in this story, I am not the victim. I'm actually the perpetrator. But the really good news about that is that now I get to show up in my relationship with my parents, not as a victim, not as an abandoned kid, but as somebody that's trying to do better and be different in that relationship. And spoiler alert, every single resentment on my list was like that. It turns out I'm the perpetrator in a lot of my resentments. So I was living in California, not abandoned, but on my own. I did live in my car for that 1 week. It was really hard. And then I moved in with a boyfriend, and I moved in with an aunt, and I moved in with a roommate. And in each situation, I got asked to leave because I'm not considerate and I don't pay rent, And I'm a bad roommate, and I get asked to leave. And I'm working at this bank, and I meet this guy, and he's 26 and I'm 17, so he can obviously buy me alcohol. And he had his own apartment, and I really needed one of those. And he wore a tie to work, so he's just checking all the boxes. So I married him. And it was not a love story for the ages. It wasn't. He was a drug addict that hated alcohol and hated people that drank. And I was a heavy drinker, my dream, that really had kind of like a thing about drugs. So we just kind of judged each other's vices. It was really abusive and really volatile, and it was not great. But here's the external thing, right? I thought, if I'm somebody's wife and I change my name, and I'll have dinner on the table every night, and I play house with this guy, then I'm gonna be good, because that's what I need. I need the structure. So I got married in a blackout. My parents had to drag me down the aisle and like deposit me on the altar, which they were happy to do. They were fine with that. They're like, she's your problem now. I don't remember my honeymoon, but I do remember when I got back that I found out I was pregnant. And I know, right? I was 21 years old. I was a daily blackout drinker. I was in an extremely abusive relationship. I'd worked my way up at this bank, and I'd actually gotten a management position that I was really proud of, but I had started coming into work drunk, and I'd started leading staff meetings drunk, and that's not professional. So I was on thin ice at work, and everybody that found out I was pregnant was horrified, but not me, because I knew I was going to be a good mom. I knew it. I knew that if I could just be somebody's mom, and I had a reason to be responsible, that I could do it. And what I didn't understand is that by that time I was a real alcoholic. And I had really good intentions. My whole life, I've had really good intentions. I've always wanted to be a good girl, a good daughter, and a good wife, and a good mother, and a good employee. But the problem is, I don't have the power to make good on those intentions. I don't. Lack of power is my dilemma. I am a real alcoholic. So when I take a drink, the only person I get to be is a person that's going to do whatever I need to do to get the next drink. And I don't have the power to not take that first drink. So I was a drunk mom. I was a mom that, didn't even try to nurse because I needed to drink. I didn't have time for that. I was a mom that tried to kill myself at my husband 6 weeks after my son was born. I was a mom that put my baby in a bathtub and passed out next to him. I was a mom that came out of blackout screaming at my toddler. I was a mom that drove drunk with my son half the time I ever drove him. And I want you to know that I came into these rooms real heavy with guilt and shame, real heavy. And I wasn't ever going to tell you that. I was never going to share that with another human being. And then what happened is you started to share with me how you had lost the power of choice and who you were when you were out there, and I started to feel less alone. And then you told me that if I just kept doing the next indicated thing, if I kept coming back and I cleaned house and I trusted God and I helped others, that I was going to have a psychic change. I was going to have a spiritual experience, and that I was going to become a mother that I was really proud of being. And that is true for me today. And somewhere along the line, the guilt and the shame that got me to come in here and sit down, God, I guess, felt that it was more useful for me to be able to carry a message, and he removed that guilt and shame from me. And I stand here today a really proud woman and a proud mom, and I'm so proud of who I am today, but I also know that I am that person today through God's power, not my own. And the second that I choose to take my hand out of the hand of God, I become that drunk mom again. And it wasn't pleasant to be a drunk mom. It didn't feel good. I knew I was doing something wrong, and I knew I needed to control my drinking. So I would go and I'd buy the little airplane bottles. Any airplane bottle friends out there? I couldn't have a whole bottle of anything. If I'd have had a handle in my house, I would have died. Like I only could get what I could get, and I'd buy the blue label Smirnoff because it was 100 proof. And I'd use it as the carrot dangling in front of me, right? So my plan was, okay, if you go and you drop your son off at preschool, you stop at the grocery store on the way home, then you can have a drink. And then maybe you can do some housework and maybe walk the dog and you can have another drink. And then maybe, go and run some errands and pick your son up from school and bring him home and have another drink and make him lunch and then have another drink. Take him to the park and have another drink. And then when your husband gets home, you open that bottle of wine and start making dinner so it looks like you just started drinking. You nurse that bottle of wine, and when everyone goes to bed, you can have a couple more drinks. And I will tell you right now, if I could have done that, I don't know if I'd be here. That was all I could hope for. That's what I wanted. I was so full flight from reality by that time that I thought that would be great. And I couldn't even do that. I would wake up in the morning and I would be shaking, and I would have to stop at the liquor store on the way to drop my son off at preschool because I couldn't walk into that preschool because I was shaking. And then I would drive around the streets of South Orange County, and I'd stop at a liquor store, and I'd get 3 or 4 little bottles and a sugar-free Red Bull, and I'd make a drink, and I'd drive around, and I would stop at a gas station, and I'd throw out my empties, and then I'd go to the next liquor store, and I'd get 3 or 4 little bottles, and I'd drive around, and I'd stop at the gas station, and I'd throw out my empties, and eventually I'd have to pull into a parking lot and set an alarm so that I could come to and hopefully make it to the preschool to pick my son up. And then I would somehow get him and make it home and put him in front of the TV, and I would pass out. And my husband would come home, and he'd scream at me, rightfully so, and I'd scream right back, and and maybe it would get physical, and maybe it wouldn't, and he'd be upset, and I'd somehow get that kid to bed, and then I'd keep drinking. And I did that every day, and I hated myself. Could not look at myself in the mirror. I hated myself. And I thought, I can't live like this anymore. I have to quit drinking. And I'm going to go to any lengths to do it. So I hired a personal trainer. To me, it seemed like a good idea. We get fit, we're in shape, and then maybe I won't want to drink because if it looks a certain way on the outside. And my gym was next to a liquor store. And the liquor store is called Booze Brothers, which I think is one of the best names for a liquor store I've ever heard. And I'd have to go into the Booze Brothers before I went, and then I'd have to run mid-set away from that trainer to go throw up because I couldn't even make it through my squats, so that didn't work. So then I started going to therapy because, I was abandoned as a child, and I'm an alcoholic, but I'm not an idiot, so I sure didn't want to tell that lady how much I was drinking, and that didn't help. And then I went to church. I didn't believe in God, and I had left the church as a teenager in a really dramatic, spectacular fashion. But I thought, if I just sit here long enough, maybe something will happen. Maybe I'll feel something. And that didn't work, and I did all kinds of outpatient programs and yoga retreats. And at one point, I was paying thousands of dollars for hypnosis to get hooked up to these earphones and these glasses. But there was a liquor store in the shopping center where the hypnosis place was too. And it just wasn't working. And every day I would wake up and I would swear I wasn't going to drink. And if you had hooked me up to a lie detector test, I would have passed it. I absolutely believed that I wasn't going to drink. I was so sick and tired. And then by 10 o'clock, I'd be going to that liquor store. And I could not understand what was happening. So my sister-in-law at the time, she knew that one of the ladies that we went to church with was in the AA, and she was sober, and she said, you should go talk to her. So I went and I talked to her, and I told her I couldn't quit drinking, and she took me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was scary. A lot of women, a lot of people coming up to me, a lot of people telling me they were so happy I was here, and I was the most important person in the room, and giving me their phone numbers and getting mine. And then some lady came up to me and she looked me in the eyes and she said, you never have to do anything alone ever again. And that was the creepiest thing I had ever heard in my entire life. It sounded like a threat. What do you mean? But I knew that you had it. I knew that you had figured it. I knew you had solved your drink problem. I don't know how I knew that, but the seeds were planted, and I knew that I didn't want my solution to involve a group activity. I just kind of wanted it to be something I could do in the privacy of my own home. And I thought, well, I think I got a few good ideas left up in the chamber, so I'm not going to go to AA. If it gets bad enough, I will. But instead, I decided to get a divorce. And I just thought, okay, if I can start over and I can have, like, I'll get a little apartment and I'll get a job and I'll, new year, new me. Like, I love a fresh start. I love a Monday. I love a first of the month, And so I did that. And then what I found out was that I'm alone in this new apartment and there's nobody to count my drinks. And I only have my son half the time, so half the time I don't even have to try to get it together. And that new job, I went to onboarding extremely hungover, and within the first week, a client called my boss and said I smelled like alcohol. But I had a new excuse of I'm going through a really hard divorce. And people eat that up. They love that, And so they'd say, oh, you smell like alcohol. And I'd be like, oh, it's wine from the night before. I had too much wine from my girlfriends. There were no girlfriends. There was also no wine. I was past wine. And I went to a psychiatrist because alcohol wasn't working for me anymore. It was making me sick, but it wasn't quieting the voices in my head. So I decided I would get some Xanax. And I went to a psychiatrist, and I said, oh, I'm going through a bad divorce. And he's like, oh, here's your Xanax. And what I found out is just like I can't have a bottle of alcohol in the house because I'll drink it all, can't have a bottle of pills in the house either because I'm going to try to kill myself. I mean, I just will. And one day I came to, I was too sick to go to work, obviously. I was too sick to even call in sick to work, And we weren't texting then, but I probably couldn't have done that either. And I was so done. I was done living this way. I could not live this way one more day. I was disgusted with myself. I just couldn't do it anymore. And the thought of quitting drinking didn't even occur to me. I was like, well, I'm just going to kill myself because, what's the other option here? And because I'm a real piece of garbage, I called my mom on the way out, to say goodbye one last time, I guess. And she hung up the phone and she called 911. And the police came, they busted down my door, they took me to the hospital, they pumped my stomach, and then they 5150'd me. And I was so insulted by that. Like, how dare you? I'm just going through a bad divorce, Why doesn't anyone believe me? But I was the most insane person in that place. Like, I could not differentiate the true from the false, and my alcoholic life seemed like the only normal one. It was terrible. And I got out of that institution, and I kept drinking. And I was living with my parents because nobody wanted me alone, and I didn't have my son anymore because nobody wanted me alone with him, and I didn't have that job anymore, and I didn't have that apartment anymore, and I just drank and drank and drank. And then one morning I came to, and my mom was sitting at the edge of my bed, and she was crying. And she just looked at me and she said, I think you're going to die. Like, I don't know what to do. And that moment, right, that first moment of surrender, and I just said, I'm an alcoholic. It's not the divorce. I'm an alcoholic, and I need to quit drinking, and I can't stop drinking, and I don't know what to do. And she called a detox, and I was like, whoa, lady. Circle back to that tomorrow. I think we might have overreacted. But she wasn't messing around. And they came and they got me from the detox. They took me to the detox. I had a seizure in the detox because that's also a thing that I do. And they took me to the hospital, and then I went back to the detox. And I didn't have a job anymore, so I didn't have health insurance. So I couldn't get into a rehab. And one of the ladies at the detox said, you just need to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And she found me a lady that was willing to rent me a room, and it was kind of like a sober living situation, but I don't think she was accredited or anything. I think she was just renting me a room out of her house. And I started going to 3 meetings a day, and I got a sponsor, and I started to work the steps, and my life changed. The promises start right away for us, right? They're right there. And I think that's what pink clouds are. I think pink clouds are just the promises coming true for us. The first step promises, the third step promises, like I am reborn That's powerful. That's not a pink cloud. That's a miracle happening in my life. And I got all the stuff back right away. I got my job back. They let me go back to that same company in like a lesser position, which was fair. And I got an apartment with a sober woman, and I got custody of my son back, and I'm feeling good, and I'm looking good, and I'm newly single, and I'm on the peninsula in Newport, which is dangerous, and I just started to feel great, and my life changed, and then I took my foot off the gas. I was like, well, I guess we're done here. And I wasn't all the way through my 9th step, and I certainly wasn't doing a 10 or 11, that's for sure. And I'm just sitting in the rooms, I'm sitting in the rooms. And then, my friend Steve Mans always talks about dying in the rooms. Then I started dying in the rooms. And what happens for me that I didn't understand is that I get uncomfortable. My favorite messenger in AA was Charlie Parker. Just my favorite. The way that he talked about this program, it's the way I could understand it. And he said one time, he said, I suffer from a life made uncomfortable by my selfishness and my self-centeredness, right? And that's what's true for me, right? Selfishness is the root of my problem. And what happens is that it manifests in my life somehow, right? Through resentment or fear or self-pity or whatever, and it makes me uncomfortable. And if I'm working a program, then I have tools for that. But if I'm not, I think it's your selfishness and self-centeredness that's making me uncomfortable, and I act accordingly. And it starts off really small for me, and what that looks like is, someone else gets a promotion at work, and that guy doesn't deserve it. I'm here at this job, he doesn't even show up on time. And I'm on time every single day, and nobody even says thank you to me. And now I need a new job because they don't appreciate me. Or I'm dating a guy, and he's not giving me enough attention, and he doesn't know what he's got, right? I mean, I was crazy. He doesn't know what he's got, and then I need to look for more attention, and I'm not willing to have the conversation with that guy, so I just decided to start cheating on him with a married man, right? Or, one time I went into a meeting that was a regular meeting of mine, and I went to sit down, and my friend said, oh, I'm saving that seat for Kimberly. And I was so resentful of that, I never went back to that meeting. A regular meeting of mine. This man was not clairvoyant. He didn't know that I was coming in late and wanted to sit right there. He was saving a seat for a friend, and I was so upset with this meeting. They don't appreciate me. I am the best cake girl they've ever had. And now I need a new meeting, And so I burned my life to the ground in untreated alcoholism. And I was in the rooms 4 or 5 times a week, guys. And I didn't realize that I wasn't treating my alcoholism. You treat your alcoholism with the steps, but I wasn't doing that. And then I'd get uncomfortable, and I'd be like, you know what? I think I need a yoga practice, Or I think maybe I'll try that church thing again, Or maybe I'll go to therapy. And all of those are really good practices, don't get me wrong, but none of them treat my alcoholism. I'm like the most limber, dry drunk that ever existed, And I got so uncomfortable that I took a pill. I took a Vicodin. I was living with my mom again because I spent all my money trying to treat my alcoholism with clothes and manicures and cigarettes and tanning booths. It was the late 2000s. And caffeine. So much you guys remember Red Lines. I was drinking a lot of those. It's a wonder I didn't have a heart attack. And I spent all my money. So I moved in with my mom, and I had a headache, and I could have taken an Advil, and I decided to take a Vicodin. And then at that point, I was lying about that, and I'm even more uncomfortable. I'm not going back to the steps. I'm certainly not getting honest. I'm not talking to my sponsor about it. I'm just sitting in the rooms. And then I took a drink. And within 6 weeks, I was found in the parking lot of a Super 8 motel in Costa Mesa. I was unconscious. I was unresponsive. I was barely breathing. I was in a coma for a couple of days. And I came to in a hospital bed, restrained and intubated with no idea where I had been. 6 weeks. And all of the doctors that came in and the nurses were like, you're so lucky. You're so lucky. You almost died. You could have died. And all I could think was, no, I'm never gonna die. I am never gonna die. I have tried so many times. This is an alcoholic death. This is gonna take forever. And I was more scared of living in that moment. That's what scared me and got me back into the rooms and got me to work. It was the thought of living one more day. So I started calling around because nobody knew what had happened to me. I had this whole fellowship and I just disappeared, and nobody knew what happened to me. So I called my friend Dawn and I'm like, hey, I'm alive, And she said, oh, great, we're having an AA birthday party. Just come to Danny's house, have some cake. And I'm like, okay, it's such an AA thing that we do. It's like, oh, you just got out of a coma? Like, come to the party. Come have some cake. You can be on chair duty, Or it's like, oh, you just got out of jail? Oh, well, we're helping Steve move. Like, it's just like, I love this program. And I went to Danny's house, and I'm sitting on this pony wall in his backyard. I'm green at this point, or yellow. I have no idea where I've been. I'm shell-shocked. I am, when they took I was intubated, and when they took the tube out, it was taped to my face, and they pulled it off, and they pulled all my skin off with it. So I had just open sores, and I'm just smoking cigarettes, and I'm lighting a cigarette with another cigarette. I have no idea what's going on. And Danny sits down next to me. It's old timer. I guess actually he was my age at that time, but he seemed like an old timer to me. And he lit a cigarette, and he was quiet for a minute, and then he looked at me and he goes, you never have to do anything alone ever again. And I heard it that time, and I needed it, and it was different. And I have not ever had to do anything alone since that day. By the grace of God, I haven't had to take a drink since that day. I got to work, and one of the women that was celebrating a birthday at that party, I asked her to sponsor me. And what she had that I wanted most of all was this relationship with God. It was still to this day, if you know Dawn Mans, you know that she's got a relationship with God like nothing else, And the God thing was hard for me because I grew up in the church, and I was told that if I had a lot of questions growing up in the church. I was an inquisitive child. I told you I was very annoying. And I had a lot of questions and a lot of things that I didn't know if I believed, and I was told that if I didn't believe all of the things, then I wasn't a believer. So I thought, okay, well, I just don't believe in God. And then I saw some things in that church that I really didn't agree with, and so now I have a resentment. And so when I came in, I'm like, I don't know, I can't do this God thing. And then you gave me the gift. You told me I could have a God of my own conception. And that was a game changer for me. I would not be here today if that wasn't the case. I'm so grateful that is the wording and the philosophy of this program. But for a while, for years, I really I tried so hard to figure out what I believed. Right? It was a belief. Do I believe in heaven? Do I believe in creation? If I don't believe that, does that mean I don't believe in God? And I was so concerned about what I believed that I think it really disadvantaged me for a lot of years. And what I know today is that the things that I'm being asked to believe are, one, that I'm beyond human aid, that I need a spiritual solution. I could believe that waking up in that coma. I could absolutely believe it. And, I have to be willing to believe at least that there's a power greater than me that can restore me to sanity. And I believed that because I saw that it happened for you. And then beyond that, what it's been is a relationship, an awareness, a contact. That's what I'm going for. That's what I'm looking for. And the belief just kind of comes when you're looking at it that way. I am an electronical device. I've got hardware, and I've got memory, and I've got parts, and I've got a cord, I've got a plug, but I'm defective unless you plug me into an outlet, and that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking for in the morning. That's what I'm looking for throughout the day. I trip on my own cord, and I pull it out of the outlet, and then I just kind of shut down and freak out, and I got to find the outlet again, and I got to plug myself in again, and that's how I've lived my life. And that's the power that's enabled me to be who I am today. And let me tell you, who God wanted to be was a much better version that I ever thought that I could ever come up with, I got to go back to that same job. They hired me 3 times. I don't know why. Like, I'm not a financial genius. They gave me a chance. They were angels. They let me come back. And then I got to give them as many good years as they gave me. And when I left, because I had an opportunity that was better for my family, I left with grace and dignity. And that's not me. That's God. I met a boy. He was at that party too, taking his birthday. And we didn't know each other very well at the time, but then when I came back in, we started going to a lot of the same meetings, and we just stand outside and smoke cigarettes and make each other laugh, and we'd share in meetings and make each other cry. And we told our sponsors we were going to start dating, and they were like, oh, God. Because, I was in my first year of sobriety, and he had just gotten his ankle bracelet off, and he was finally able to speak to people in complete sentences and look people in the eye. And my sponsor said, if you want to make it out of this alive, then that boy cannot be your higher power. Your higher power has to be your higher power, and your program has to come first. And if it doesn't, you're going to drink. And I believed her. And so we've done that. We've walked through life. We got married. Wednesday was our 14-year wedding anniversary. And thank you. Thank you. You're really clapping for him more than you're clapping for me on that, because he's had to put up with a lot. But we had an AA wedding, and my sponsor got ordained and married us, and his sponsor was his best man, and we were surrounded by all the people that raised us in AA. And then I was like, all right, let's start having some more kids, because it's pretty easy. The first time I wasn't even trying. And then I couldn't get pregnant, and I thought, well, that's bullshit. I finally got this life, and now I'm in love, and I'm stable, and I what? And I remember, the women in this program telling me that I needed to pray for God's will, even if that meant that I wasn't going to have more babies. I was told that if that wasn't in the cards for me, it was because God had other plans for me. So I'd be like, okay, God, I'm praying for your will. If your will is that I have a baby, And it took me a long time to get there. And when I finally got into acceptance with that, I got pregnant. And we had to do a lot of fertility, and we lost one along the way, and that seemed hard, and we got to walk through all that, and we have a 9 and a 12-year-old now that have never seen us drink. And they know we're gone a lot at meetings, and they don't get why. And to me, that's a gift. That's a gift that they don't know why I don't go. They know I'm an alcoholic. They don't know what that means, but they don't understand why I have to go to meetings to be a better mom, because they think I'm a good mom. I think that if I was a dry drunk, my daughter would be like, go. Right? And they don't. And that big one, that baby that I put in the bathtub and passed out, he's 22. And he had a lot of, his dad didn't get the same grace that I got. And it was a tough situation for the two of them. But I had living amends to make. And part of those amends that I made to my ex-husband and part of those amends that I made to my son was that I was going to be an agent of peace in their relationship. And I was going to be a good co-parent. And that was really hard, because there were times when he was a jerk, and I'm like, I can't, no. I don't crawl before anyone, right? I read that somewhere in here. And my sponsor would be like, you were a terrible mother to his son, and you were a terrible wife to him, and how free do you want to be? And I showed up for them both, but it was tough, and he had a real tough, he's on the autism spectrum, and he faced a lot of stuff, and but I show up for him every day as best I can. Matthew and I were just giving him relationship advice in the car on the way here, and I just keep doing the things, right? I've learned that there's always a new layer of growth available to me if I'm willing to dig in a little bit more. A couple years ago, it was around this time, because my favorite meeting is a meeting that we stay in the step the whole month. So it was August, and we were in step 8, and it came to me that I had an amends to make. And I had never thought about this before, but it was amends to my grandparents who had passed away for some behavior in sobriety, which is the worst. I hate making those amends. It makes me feel so bad, but it's not about me. And I knew I had to make that amends. And I felt so much shame and guilt, and it affected me so much. And I wrote that letter, and I showed it to my sponsor, and I went to the cemetery, and I made that graveside amends, and I felt like something had changed in me. Like I just felt like something had broke open within me. I knew that I was different, and I didn't know how, and I didn't know why. And then a week later, I got a call from a blocked number, and in my stomach, I knew what it was, and it was my son, and he was in jail, and he was facing a lot of felonies and a lot of time in state prison. And that was the hardest thing that, we've been walking through that for a couple years as a family. And what I've learned is that I will make anything about me. Like you would have thought that I went to jail with how traumatized I was by this. And I also learned that God is everything or he's nothing. That child is just mine to help care for, but I'm not his higher power, and I don't get to make decisions for him that are above my pay grade. And we got to walk through that in acceptance. I remember when he called me, I was on my way to this music festival that I go to every year to go see my favorite band, and I was so excited. And then I got that call, and I went with my sober sister, and we went to this music festival, and I just cried. I'm in the pit, and I'm crying, and I said to God, like, I'm not going to let this change how I feel about you, God. No matter what happens, my relationship with you, I am not taking my hand out of your hand. And I didn't, He's in a diversion program because he had never been in trouble before. He's not a bad kid. He's just really stupid. And my friend Tammy in the program, she says, keep them alive till they're 25, Sarah. And we're like 3 years away from that. And I don't know if that's true, but I really hope. He's in these rooms. He's actually at a meeting tonight. And I don't know if he's an alcoholic, and I don't know if he'll get this thing, but I know there's no better group of people to put their arms around my kid than you. I've been going to my home group for like 20 years now. It took me that long to get sober. And the women in those rooms, the women that I didn't want to have anything to do with, those women raised me. They taught me how to be a mom. They taught me how to be a sober woman. They taught me how to show up for work. They taught me how to keep a house. They taught me how to be a wife. I am so grateful. I love alcoholics as a species. I love coming to new places and meeting new alcoholics. It's like going to a family reunion and meeting second cousins that you've never met, that you're related to, but you've never met them. We're probably not going to go take a walk around Grandma's neighborhood and smoke pot later, but it's that same connection. Like we are family. All this fellowship that I never thought I wanted. I can't imagine my life without the group activity of the fellowship of sobriety. But I also can't imagine my life without the steps. I wake up every day, and my job is to watch for manifestations of self and watch for manifestations of God, and to look for both of those things. And I still have really big feelings, and that's a great thing, because those feelings are a roadmap, right? Those big feelings, those crazy reactions to stuff, it illuminates whether I'm dealing with a manifestation of self or a manifestation of God. And then I know what to do. I have a beautiful life. Matthew and I bought a home a few years ago, and we were just like, who do they think they're lending this money to? Like, this guy is like a gambling addict, and was found by a dumpster. Like, how is this happening to us? And we just kept doing the next right thing, one day at a time, and then all of a sudden we have good credit. It's like, what? I'm on the board of the PTA. I work with... They don't know, they don't know. I leave a lot of parts on my past out. But I'm also pretty open in my community, because there's a lot of moms out there. There's a lot of moms that struggle. There's a lot of moms who use alcohol as the carrot dangling in front of them. Today, I use you as the carrot dangling in front of me. I use God as the carrot dangling in front of me. And Do we have new people tonight? Any new people? That would be like really intimidating to go to a convention. But if you're new, or if you're not new and you're getting uncomfortable and you're treating your alcoholism with other things besides the step, I would encourage you to get back in. Pull open 60 to 63, pull open 86 to 88, and get back in the steps, because it is a life beyond my wildest dreams. And I will say to you that you don't ever have to do anything alone ever again. And if that feels like a threat to you, I hope that you stay until it feels like a promise. Thank you guys so much.